My fellow citizens of all nations, The Shagreen Skin by Honore de Balzac. I'm going to talk about this book. For those people that don't want to get any spoilers and etc., I highly advise you to read this book. And if you already read it or you don't plan to read it and just want to know about this book, then right now I'm going to talk about this book. The book basically has sort of three main characters drive mainly the entire story. One is Raphael, obviously. The other two are Feodora and Pauline. Feodora is Raphael's first obsession, first love, while Paulina is in love with Raphael, but Raphael is in love, or so he thinks that he's in love with Feodora. So this is a sort of a complicated relationship, and at the beginning of the story, it's not so obvious that Paulina is in love with Raphael, but there are certain hints and certain questions are raised. For example, when Raphael needs money and he suddenly shows up, and Paulina tells him that, "Oh, I found this money there." We know that Raphael already searched his entire room and he did not find a penny, and suddenly she claims that she found money in his room, and that was a very suspicious moment. And later she reveals that actually every day she worked basically, and half of the money she gave to her mother and other half she dedicated to Raphael basically. And at the early stage basically both of them are very poor, and Raphael sort of, when he recalls the story with his friends, curses his fate because he realizes that he loved Paulina, and Paulina was a very important woman in her life, and at the same time he has sort of a rightful questions toward her in the sense that he's her teacher basically, and sort of like a very complicated relationship. Like when you read this book basically you don't feel like resentment or hatred toward like any specific character. You just understand how much the circumstances matter, how much the upbringing matters, and at the end of the day you cannot like blame anyone or anything. This is what's so interesting about Balzac, which I've noticed during reading this book. I had this feeling of outrage, feelings of anxiousness, but I could not hate any specific character. I could not like condemn and direct sort of hate toward any character. It was everything was sort of intertwined and everything was understood, and with these complex circumstances Balzac shows us what happens when politicians F up basically, and what happens when these people play with human life, and how miserable human life generally is, and what type of life certain people in society lead after basically certain order collapses. Feodora is Raphael's sort of obsession. Yes, she in a certain sense does manipulate Raphael, but she never like, she's obvious, like she tells him very clearly that she is not interested. Raphael considers this sort of a challenge and etc., and he believes that just because she is rich and he's sort of this person that has able to get in touch with her, somehow he's destined for her. And Raphael also does very naive and stupid things as well. And at the end of the day, Feodora is more of a like a materialistic woman that does not believe in love, is not in love, like does not appreciate somebody's dedication and compassion. I mean, after Raphael explains his situation, how he actually lived, he reveals everything and mocks it and etc., and shows absolute disdain and not like caring at all about what he used to go through. And at the same time you want to like command Raphael, because even when he plans to commit suicide, for example at the beginning of a story, when he finds randomly after he comes out of the gambling house and he goes to this moves over the bridge to commit suicide basically, he like has this pocket money in his pocket and he gives it to the poor. Even that's at the beginning of the stage, like we see the character of Raphael, and in a certain sense no one is right and no one is wrong again. At least this is how I see it. Like everyone is sort of victim of circumstances. As for Paulina, basically I felt so sad for Raphael and Paulina, because Paulina is clearly, turns out that the entire time she's in love with Raphael, while Raphael is obsessed with this another woman, and she tells him something very interesting, that why are you so obsessed with Feodora? Like it's like she's the only woman, and she was giving him like obvious hints and etc., but he also explained that he could not see it back then. It's also interesting that at the end of the story, when he makes this wish that I wish Paulina to love me, the skin does not shrink at all, because it cannot fulfill a wish that is already fulfilled basically. She's already in love with him, so there's nothing to fulfill and it cannot do it. Of course, seeing about this Shagreen skin, or this magic skin basically, that can fulfill any sort of wish, and at the same time it shrinks, and which takes his life in everything. Sort of is very tremendous power, and that also shows us the materialistic side of the world and how important the materialistic side is. He expressed, for example, how important it is for a boy to have money in his pocket to impress a woman he wants to impress, a sense to be able to like pay for basic stuff, and how expensive it was for Raphael. It also shows that once Raphael basically has this overwhelming power, and at the same time he realizes that every time he makes a wish, the skin shrinks, and also his life shrinks with it, and his health declines. He sort of suddenly is overcome by the existential fear of death, to the point that he meets up with Polinash for a short time, and he falls in love, and it's debatable whether how deeply was he in love with Polina, but he sees that Feodora is an empty woman. She's a shell. She's just this outside of image, and there is nothing in her. She's just, at least for him, this is the way he observed it, that she's just this character that is all about herself. And on her defense, by the way, she says that she is not interested almost from the beginning, and she's just looks at him as a friend. And it's very interesting, by the way, that thing. Also, there's this complicated relationship between Raphael. His birth is not simple, and but at the same time there's this political turmoil, and it also shows that what political turmoil does to average people and how miserable their life becomes during this political turmoil, and when these people in position of influence and power make these crazy decisions, how it affects people for love of life and love of party and having these orgies and etc. How mourning basically reveals it all. But the thing is that these things basically which Raphael dreams of, basically he can have it all, but he suddenly realizes that he should not wish anything, and he lives in this palace, in this expensive palace, and he basically is full of disdain toward Feodor at this point. While before, during his party periods, basically, this is like, of course, before he got this magic skin, he, thanks to his friends gambling, basically gets a lot of money, and still tries to basically impress her, and as he expresses it, I used to try to see her in every prostitute I was with, or in every woman I tried to see her face. Of course, that was very hard for me to sort of understand what he meant. And in this entire time, I was thinking about what Polina told him. Like, why are you obsessed with this Feodora? Like, it's not like she's the only woman. And what is seeing like a twist of a fate is that Polina turns out to be becomes like even richer woman than anyone could imagine, because her father returns and brings this wealth, and she's very rich, becomes a very rich woman, and these two meet up, and they get married and etc. And I thought this marriage part is not clear. Like, I wish there was more explained how, when, for example, like Raphael met her parents and etc. Like, this is not shown at all, and like, in a certain sense I wanted to see more of that relationship. And there is also this thing that after this they fall in love, they spend all the time together. Raphael decides to like throw away the magic skin for a little time, and the gardener returns the skin to him, and he sees how it's shrinked, and he's suddenly overcome with this absolute fear of death, and he doesn't want to die, he wants to live. And like, there is this contradiction of a young man that wanted to commit suicide because he had nothing to live for, that wanted to die. At the end of a story, basically, he dies like inside of Polina. The way it is explained at the end, he wanted to basically at the end of his life express his love, but his magic skin almost already vanished, and he's dying, and the only thing he managed to do was to just express his inhumane words and just bite her breast and die. And once the last words we see is that, do you see, I've killed him. It's like Paulina in the middle of a story, she tells him that you will fall in love with a rich woman, and she will be your death. He made this wish, for example, that I wish Paulina to love me, but yet he never made that type of wish toward Feodora. But he could, but he did not. And that will stay a mystery to me. Everything is mental at the end of the day. He was on that mental state at that point. Like, he could not see the end of her road or any other opportunity. And the greatest deception men suffer is from their own opinion. And this is very well seen in this work when we look at this as a supreme being that looks at Raphael and looks at all these other characters and etc. Also how the wealth basically attracts this type of people that just want to get something from you all the time, all they care. And is what it is at the end of the day.